Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. It's my honor to convene this daily conversation around various aspects of the pandemic. We are talking about the financial crisis, the health crisis, the racial inequality crisis, as well as the major news events that take place en route to the US elections. And of course, this week, no bigger news than the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Tonight is episode 197. We've been on the air for 197 straight days from the Upper West Side in New York since the lockdown started. And we are so grateful to everyone who's been able to be with us all these days and weeks and months. And as we head to episode number 200, we have a great series of speakers, and no one's more special than tonight's guest. You are going to meet the poet, novelist, essayist, feminist, award winner, author of 30 books in 45 languages, Erica Jong. She's widely known for her 1973 novel Fear of Flying, which was groundbreaking in its frank portrayal of sexuality. We'll talk about her writing, her career, and her teaching with RBG, and more. You'll meet her in just a few minutes. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support of this show. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't cancel your virtual event without talking to us first. We have done events for 50 people and 100,000 people. I bet your event is somewhere between those two numbers. We'd love to have you talk to you about your event or a talk show if you'd like to have one. Here's my email address, sree@sree.net. If you haven't seen our show before, in our first 195 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 129 million social impressions, 347 guests, including 202 women. We're going to keep upping that ratio from 65 cities in 17 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We are able to do this in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. Please check them out and find our archives on youtube.com/Sreenet, youtube.com/Sreenet. Please share this with your friends and family right now. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. We're able to do this because of our awesome sponsors. We'll tell you about them in a little bit, and our awesome producers. Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon, and Rose Horowitz, who you will meet tonight because she's going to help me do my interview with Erica. So are you ready to meet Erica Jong? I know I am. I'm super excited. I know you are as well. Please tag your friends right now. They can watch this later if they can't watch us right now. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And so with that, let's get ready to bring Erica on stage. You are going to have a real treat tonight because we're going to learn so much together. And please say hello to Erica. Hello.
Hello, how are you? Hi, Sree.
I'm so grateful that you're here with us tonight. Thank you for your time. My first question always, how are you? Where are you? And how have you and your family done through the pandemic?
Well, I grew up on the Upper West Side. I now live on the Upper East Side, quite near Hunter College. And we are home a lot alone. And it's beginning to get to me. I'm a very social person. I love people. And I love listening to their stories and telling them my stories. So it's very weird being alone with my husband, whom I adore, but not to be able to go out to dinner, not to be able to go out to lunch, not to be able to meet new people. I find that rather difficult.
I can believe that. I know we're missing the interaction that we all had, and I'm glad you clarified that you adore your husband. So it wasn't a comment. It wasn't a comment about the time you're being forced to spend with him.
No, I mean, he's very funny and we get along really well. So that is a tremendous blessing. I have a daughter who lives nearby whom I adore, and she comes over and we socially distance, which is really weird.
So I know that one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you, we want to talk to you about your career, your writing, everything else, but you had, in terms of timeliness of what's happening in the news, the chance to spend unusual, to be in the company of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in an unusual capacity. So please tell us about that, as we note that today there was a small private ceremony in Washington to mark her passing, and lots of photographs have been sent out from it. I did not watch it live, but I did see a lot of photographs out of that.
She was a wonderful woman, brilliant, of course. We all know how brilliant she was. But she was also, at her heart, a teacher. And we were teaching in the same program at the Salzburg seminar in Salzburg, Austria. And she was so down to earth. She would always say, her students would come and say, "Excuse me, Justice Ginsburg." And she would say, "Call me Ruth." She was very down to earth. She was very maternal and loving. And she had a funny and clever husband named Marty, who kept everyone laughing all the time. And I think that he honored her because he thought she was brilliant, but also he interrupted all the time because he was a joke teller. And I think she enjoyed his company very, very much.
And what was the interaction with you and her as you were getting to know her? What was, relay some of her humor? I read a lot about that, and her interest in so many topics.
She was very warm and very maternal and very clever. And she would ask you the most penetrating questions about your life. And I can't remember any of them now, not one, but there was a warmth about her and a kind of maternal quality. You would not really expect this in a justice. You would expect a justice to be cold, cool, and she was not cool at all.
And when you heard the news, you had, of course, we had known that she'd been struggling for so long, and she just seemed to bounce back every single time,
right?
Taking cases from in the arguments, listening on the phone at the hospital, and multiple cases. Tell me what it was like when you heard, what ran through your mind on Friday night.
I was very, very sad when I heard about her passing, because she was a role model to me. She was not just brilliant, but also warm and kind and loving. And she was a great teacher. People probably think of her as a justice, but I thought of her as a teacher because she had the ability to communicate her interest in your point of view.
And that's what a great teacher does, right? Bring you along and teach.
She was a great teacher because she let her hair down, really, and let you see her as a human being. And that's the way I think a teacher makes a mark. More than even the things she imparts to you or the books she writes, but you see the human being and the kindness of the human being. And when I was at Columbia Graduate School, not all my teachers were like that. Some of them were very snobbish. Some of them thought they were better than all their students. That down-to-earth quality was very, very rare.
I can believe that. For generations of younger folks who know her only from, an opinion here, a dissent there, and the movies, they may not realize how much of an impact she really had as a trailblazing lawyer. And, as you saw her career, she was already famous when she got to the Supreme Court. That's one of the things that was said about her. And it was also interesting to think about how the court changed. If you remember, President Clinton was very proud of how centrist she was. So in your opinion, is it that she changed, or the court changed, or the country changed, that she became so much more, at least outwardly liberal and progressive? How do you explain that?
From the very beginning of her career as a feminist, she spoke about the rights of men as well as the rights of women. I come from an era where we were always raving about how oppressed women were. But what Ruth could do was she was able to show how inequality in the law also hurts men and boys. And that was quite extraordinary in my feminist generation. And it made you respect her the more.
Thank you. In just a minute, I'm going to bring on Rose Horowitz, journalist and producer of this show, co-producer, so she can ask some more questions. But in the meantime, we want to do what we call a global tour of people watching from all over. So let's go to Jonathan Borstein, watching from the East Village. He has watched 197 episodes in a row. Hi, Jonathan. A memory of the East Village. I presume you've not been there in at least 6 months. So what would you like people to know about the East Village? Erica, if you could tell us.
East Village. Well, the East, I'm a New Yorker. So when I was in high school and I went to a school called the High School of Music and Art, we used to go down to the East Village to explore when we were young teenagers, and we would go to the coffee shops. And in my era, the coffee shops were really, really important. And of course, we would pretend we never had a drink.
I can understand that. Let's see who else is here. Neil Parekh, one of our team members at Digimentors, says, wow, just wow, watching from Springfield, Virginia. Pradnya says, good grief, I'm super fangirling over here in Silver Spring, Maryland. So they're both from the DC area. Tell us something about DC.
DC is interesting, much more interesting than people think. When we were kids, we used to be taken down there to go to the FBI building and to see the great museums, the National Academy and the other museums. But it turns out that DC is quite a warm place, full of interesting people who like to entertain each other. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one.
Nice. That's great. Let's look at more comments here. Mariel's watching in Kansas City. Any memories?
I don't think I've ever been to Kansas City.
All right, we have to fix that. And my mom's watching from Kerala in India. You've been to India?
I have been to India, and I never got to Kerala. I went to Rajasthan, to all the places on the tourist route. But I also had a wonderful experience, which was I was invited to a conference called Think India in Goa. And my husband and I discovered Goa, which is a part of India that's very, very beautiful, and which belonged to another country for many, many years, and only became part of India, I think, in the 50s.
And that was Portugal. It was one of the colonies of Portugal. Let's keep going. Jake Basile's watching from Long Island. Anything to say about Long Island?
Long Island, my God, where I first went to camp as a kid. And many of my friends have beautiful houses in Long Island that I'm happy to be invited to. I like the very tip of Long Island, where many people don't go, and which is not as well known.
Got it. Let's keep going. And Judith is watching from San Francisco.
Hello, Judith.
A San Francisco memory?
Well, San Francisco is the city beautiful in the United States. It has everything. It has mountains, it has sea, it has the beautiful San Francisco Bay. And I remember being knocked out the first time I saw San Francisco. And of course, I left my heart in San Francisco, as the song goes.
I know a lot of us have done that. Let's keep going here, and then I'll bring Rose on. Paula says, I'm sorry I can't join this. Greetings from Tallahassee. People are tagging their friends. Auntie Tem is watching from the Upper East Side, says, hello, neighbor.
Hello.
Mark is watching from Durham, North Carolina. I'm a big fan of Erica. I remember her book, Fear of Flying.
Thank you.
Do you ever get tired of people saying that to you?
I get tired of it because I've written 30 books. And, but when I look at the lives of other writers, I realize that many, many writers in history are remembered particularly for one book. And so I don't feel so sorry for myself.
I understand.
I wish that people read all my books, but that is very rare. It's true of Dickens. And I'm not Dickens.
Rajan says,
but I do very well, I think.
Yeah. Rajan says, Fear of Flying is the favorite book of the great love of my adult life. And good evening from Long Island, formerly of the Upper West Side. Coffee shops are still important. I have friends who own coffee shops in the triangle, the research triangle down there. And we think we're awesome here in the DMV. The DMV meaning another name for the Washington area. I wasn't familiar with that DMV before. Jonathan says, my village, East Village history memories include such coffee shops as Cafe de Medici, Figaro, and Borgia.
That when we were kids, our first great voyage away from home was to go down to the village and sit in a coffee shop. At 12 or 13 years old, it was proof that you were growing up. And I remember the Medici coffee shop.
Oh, you do? That's awesome. That is so cool.
Many of the other ones. It was a proof that you were a grown-up if you could go downtown on the subway by yourself with a friend and sit and sip coffee in a coffee shop.
I love that. Let's see who else is here. Pat says, I'm a Barnard alumna in Connecticut who had the good fortune of taking a memoir writing course with Erica at Barnard.
Wow. Well, I'm writing my autobiography now, and I hope I remember all the lessons I taught my memoir course. I love to teach. Teaching is one of the things that I enjoy the most.
I'm so glad to hear that. And let's see, we'll do a couple of more names and then we will move on. Opali is watching from India and she says, hi. Aparna says, I got to see Erica at a Penn Writers event back in New York City at the Ace Hotel. Now feeling homesick here in LA.
That's great. I mean, I remember that. I remember, I think, pretty much all the places where I've gotten to interact with readers. But I really should say that I love my readers, that they correspond with me. They write to me, they tweet at me. And I feel very blessed and very loved because of the interaction I get from readers. I'm not a snob about readers. I love to hear from readers.
You know, there are some professors who think life would be better if there were no students, if they could just concentrate on their work. I worked as the chief digital officer of the Metropolitan Museum. There were some people who wished that they were, in the museum world, that there were not as many visitors because they detract from the work. So you're saying that you like your readers and you like interacting with them.
I like interacting with them. And I have to say that I get a lot from them. When I talk to readers, it helps me figure out what to write next, because I really want to write about things that people care about.
That's great. Diane's watching from Margate, New Jersey. Her husband, Terry, catered your book party at your apartment with Nancy Weber.
Wow.
He said, remember the duck cassoulet?
I do. I love duck. But every time I eat duck, I feel very guilty at eating ducks because they're so adorable.
I hear you. Pradnya says, you said that you're no Dickens, but then she says, but then Dickens is no Erica Jong.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, we're gonna take a break from all the comments and bring onto the stage our friend Rose Horowitz, who's one of our producers, who is a writer, and she is the founder of the hashtag Women to Follow, which everybody should follow. Hashtag Women to Follow, and Erica certainly is a woman to follow. At Erica Jong, please follow her. She said that she's learning Twitter and she's already done so well on it. And one of the things you said is you're working on trying to write short on Twitter, right?
I'm working on my autobiography. It may take me the rest of my life to write it.
Well, we're booking you now for your one of your events. I hope will be with us and maybe catered with that wonderful caterer that we already know. So we could tie that
would be
together.
Wonderful. I would love it.
All right, so let's bring on Rose Horowitz. Rose is going to join us, and she's going to spend a few minutes asking you questions. Here we go, writer to writer. Here we go. Hi, Rose.
Hi. Hi. So great.
Hi, Rose. How are you?
So honored to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about how we met, which is on Twitter, correct?
That's right.
I think you were following me from my hashtag Woman to Follow.
Right.
And I think last night I saw you put out a tweet that how much Ruth Bader Ginsburg meant to women and men.
That's right.
And I tweeted back and said, yes, women and men, because I think so many of the tributes in the Times, in the Washington Post are saying that, she meant so much to women. But if we're really, saying that equality is for, human rights and equality is for everyone, then she meant so much to everyone and for both sexes and all people.
I think that was what was unique about her. Of course, she was a feminist, but she understood how men can be excluded also by a patriarchal society. And that was quite unique about her as a feminist, that she saw both sides. She saw the side of women, of course. She was a woman and a very accomplished woman, but she also had great empathy for men. And she understood that sometimes men don't have the complete freedom that we think they have.
Well, and she used that as a strategy, to when she started arguing cases with the ACLU and saying how I guess she thought that if she would show how men couldn't be treated equal, people would be more willing to see that women weren't treated equally.
It was very, very smart of her because, of course, in a patriarchal society, men are obliged to do things they may not like. And in a patriarchal society, women are obliged to do things we may not like. And by looking at both genders, she was able to win her debates, but also she always reached out for empathy.
Yes.
Empathy was her middle name. And she understood that if you could spread empathy, make people see the other side of the story, you would win your cases better. She did that from the beginning of her career.
She did, and she socialized with, as we know, people who were on the opposite side of spectrum from her, because I guess there was this saying, I'm trying to remember the quote, but it was something like, you always want to win your point, but, you know, have others join you, I think is the way the quote goes.
She was very, very good at that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she had a famous friendship with Ken, who was her most famous friend that we wouldn't believe was her friend.
I'm blocking on it.
I'm blocking on it too.
Okay.
But she did not divide people.
Do you mean Anthony Scalia?
Anthony Scalia,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay. Yes.
She was friends with Anthony Scalia.
Yes.
And she had that ability, that warmth for people. Yes.
They sang in the chorus at the New York, at the Metropolitan Opera together.
Yes, they were brought together by their adoration of opera. And yes, they were both in the opera together.
Yeah.
And apparently somebody even wrote an opera about the Supreme Court, which they performed it.
Yes. And tell us a little about how you became, you know, how I of course had read Fear of Flying, and you know, it's really amazing that you wrote that. I mean, how did you come to write that? And can you tell? I know that too many people ask you about that novel, but let's use that as a touchstone.
I thought that women don't tell the complete truth about their lives because they're afraid of offending the men in their lives. And so I thought it was really important to have a book in which you paid no heed to men who might not like you because you were too outspoken. And as a result of that, I always found men who liked outspoken women.
I hear your husband is laughing in the background.
He's laughing in the background.
And did you expect the reaction you got from that book? Was that a surprise? Were you, you know, how did you?
I was surprised that people thought it was so sexual. I did not think of it as a sexual book. I thought of it as a book by a woman who wanted to be honest about her life, but I didn't think it was a sex book at all.
Did you have anything to do, I don't know if we can call it the cover, but with the cover, which was provocative at the time?
You should have seen the cover before that one.
Okay.
It would have curled your hair.
I
rejected many covers before the one with the navel that later became famous. I mean, there were covers that were so awful, you would not believe it.
Wow. Okay. And and that was translated, or it sold, I think, 20 million copies. Is that correct?
It has sold, as far as I know, 38 million.
Wow.
And it has been published in Arabic, which absolutely blows my mind. And it has been published in so many different languages. It's quite wonderful.
That's terrific.
And that's one of the less sexual covers, the one you have on your screen.
Okay.
I just wanted to read it for people who can't see. It's not a high quality picture, but it says, the most uninhibited, delicious, erotic novel a woman ever wrote. A winner, John Updike, who some people have heard of. So you're saying it was more provocative than this?
Oh, God. You would not believe it. This is tasteful compared to what they started with. But, you know, people got very excited that a woman was writing about sex. I don't know why. Because
the woman before you had, of course, right? So,
yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. But maybe not in 50 to 75 years before you, perhaps?
You know, there have been many wonderful, wonderful women writers. Doris Lessing wrote about sex
Yes.
before me. But maybe she didn't have such a frivolous point of view. She was more serious. I'm a very funny writer. And so maybe that's why more people read my book. There's a kind of lightness in my writing because I have a sense of humor. But Doris Lessing wrote a great deal about sex, but she did so in a much more unamusing way.
Did you ever meet her?
No, I never did. I would have liked very much to meet her because I admired her tremendously.
Did you ever meet Toni Morrison?
Oh, Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison and I came up at the same time. And she was a book editor at the time and one of the smartest and nicest people I ever met. And she submitted her first novel at Random House to her own colleagues. And they came back and said, Black people don't read books, which is completely untrue. And yet she used to laugh about it when I knew her because, of course, Black people are so important now in the publishing industry. They absorb books, they grab books. People of color are among our greatest readers. So that was absolutely not true. But the publishing industry at that time was very white and very stuck up. And so they assumed that people of color were not part of their audience. It was not true at all.
So she's one of my favorite writers, and I've read Doris Lessing, every book of both of theirs. Tell us a little about your poetry and have you always written poetry?
I've always written poetry. I publish it, but I don't expect anybody to read it. And I've done some Zoom readings of my poetry, which is not easy.
I saw on your website you did some readings in 2019, correct?
I try to put them up there because I know that poetry takes a while to absorb, mm-hmm. and that you don't immediately get a poem, and that you have to go back over it, and if it's a good poem, and figure out the subtleties, the language, and people don't absorb what you're reading immediately. I love to do live readings of my work, and I love when people come up to me and say, I didn't understand that. Tell me what you meant. And I'm quite happy to talk about it because that's the fun of a reading, is interacting with the people who come.
Yeah, it's almost like a comic, you always get a sense of what people in the audience, what people are responding to when you read a poem or you tell a joke.
It's very important, because we write to communicate, and the way we communicate is very important. And whether sometimes you write something that goes over people's heads. Well, you want to know that too.
Mm-hmm. And what do you find, have you always taught, or tell me about your teaching and what you find most valuable, what you find valuable about the teaching?
I love teaching. I love the exchange with students. I love the giving back. I think that's important.
And do you find you learn when you teach from your students?
Absolutely. First of all, you learn how much our communication often does not work. And a writer has to know that. A human being has to know that. We have to understand that sometimes we're not as transparent as we think we are. And it's very important to reach out to other human beings. I think that for me, writing is a way of reaching out to other human beings.
And when you do you choose your, what authors are you reading now, or can you tell us what you choose to read? Is it something close to what you write, what you think you write like or would like to write, or is it you choose something opposite or different?
No, it's not opposite. I've read a lot of African American writers because I want to understand how we're different and how we're the same. I've read a lot of writers from other cultures as well, because for the same reason. And I'm interested in our common humanity, how we're different, how we're alike.
Fascinating. Thank you. And do you have a routine schedule? Do you get up in the morning, write, or do you write late at night? Do you have something you could tell us about your day?
Sometimes I write in the morning, sometimes I write at night. Sometimes I can't get down to writing because I have so many other things to do. And then I don't write till the middle of the night. I don't have one schedule.
Okay. It's interesting because some writers, say I write every day and, 5 a.m. till 11, and then I go and take a walk and I don't touch, the writing. So interesting to hear that you're flexible, and like in a way your writing that I know of shows this kind of looseness and to it that's interesting.
I actually think that writing is a normal human activity. I don't put it on a pedestal. As human beings, we need to communicate. And we can communicate through speaking, through lecturing, and we can also communicate through writing. And when I was growing up, I was a great letter writer. I adored writing letters. And I think letter writing is a perfectly good literary form.
Do you write letters now?
Less so, because I'm always writing a book. It's impeded my letter writing.
But your writing, I think, will be archived at Columbia University.
It is archived at Columbia University, yes. And I've gone up there and seen all the boxes. They wanted to show them to me. It's kind of terrifying that there's so much stuff.
Well, 38 books and many poems and many letters. Correct?
I think 40 books.
40 books.
Yeah.
Incredible.
But some of them are poetry, so they're shorter.
Okay.
Right?
You want to read us? Would you read us anything? Do you have anything you'd read us? That would be a treat.
If I can find, let's see.
I see a lot of books.
Where's my,
What do you-
my God. I don't have it here. I don't have it.
While she's looking, hi everybody. Thank you so much for watching this conversation, incredible conversation with the legendary Erica Jong, our guest, writer, poet, novelist, activist, feminist, and this is her website, ericajong.com. And I'm just going to encourage everybody to tag their friends so they can watch this live or later. And they can, you can ask your questions. We're with her for about another 20 minutes or so. And you can see on her websites, access to her Twitter, which is at Erica Jong. And she even has a section about all things Italian in America, woman author icon and Italophile. And this is the Italian Cultural Center where she gave a talk. And here are her more than 40 books, as you can see. The World Began with Yes, The Fear of Dying. Of course, the book that she said she is tired of everybody asking her about it, but she understands that people do want to talk about the fear of flying. and so much more you can read and see on her website. So please check it out, ericajong.com. And back to Rose. Before that, I'm just going to look at some more comments here because so many comments are coming in. We're going to run out of space here in just a few minutes. And let's just look at here. We had a question. What other books of yours would you want to be remembered for? And which one would you recommend next for readers who only know Fear of Flying, Erica?
Well, my favorite book is Fanny, Being the True History of the Adventures of Fanny Hackabout Jones. And it's an 18th century picaresque novel. But instead of being the story of a man, it's the story of a woman. And there are not many 18th century picaresque novels that are the stories of a woman's life. Fanny, Being the True History of the Adventures of Fanny Hackabout Jones. It's about a young girl named Fanny who is left on the doorstep of a great house. She's an orphan, and she grows up to be a famous writer. And people claim that it's the story of my life, as if I had lived in the 18th century.
That's right. Let's just look at a couple more comments, and I think you're ready to read us something. But let's just look at a couple of more comments. People are watching from different places. Jonathan does report that Cafe Reggio remains from the list that you mentioned. Ashok says, "Welcome to Kerala after the crisis is over." And Mark says later, could you talk about sugar in two vastly different books, but very relevant to the world we live in. And then let's see here. How cool that Rose Horowitz met Erica over Twitter and hashtag women to follow. And
really
lots of comments coming in. Sorry, Erica, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that communication is really important to me. And communication can take the form of conversation like we're having now. It can take the form of writing poetry or writing essays or writing letters or writing novels. And I think we need to use the language more, because when we form language, we discover what we really think. Until we try to express what we think, we may not really know what we think. And why the use of language is so important.
Completely agree. Mark says, I think Zane did the same thing for erotic literature in the African American community. And Pradnya says, Fear of Flying was published the year I was born. Yikes, 47 years ago. And we as women are still struggling for equity and for our voices to be heard.
I think that's true. I think it's been a very long process for women to be heard, and we are still not heard completely.
All right, let's go to the poetry that you're going to read, and I'll leave you with Rose.
Thank you.
I write poetry, so you know, ever since I was 8 or so.
It's really wonderful. I read in an article a while ago that a child was found on the beach, and a drowned child. And I wrote this poem called Child on the Beach. The Mediterranean is black with bodies, as in the time of the Trojan War, when Homer sang of bloody battles and heroes lay unburied beneath the topless towers of Troy. But this little boy of 3 sleeps unburied on a beach. Where is he from? The chemical fog of Syria, the garbage dumps of beautiful Beirut, the chaos of civilization come undone. He rests, his parents lost, his sisters drowned, his brother thrown up on another beach. What shall I do with this dead toddler who breaks me open to grief. I will adopt him, my nameless grandson, welcome him into my shattered breast. His death so sweet, even cherubs weep, and nereids float him in their seaweed boats. Little one, now you are mine. Sleep in my arms while I sing you this lullaby. Maybe you'll awaken in a kinder world where children don't die at the edge of the sea. Meanwhile, dream of peace for this broken world.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just like gave me chills, and I don't often feel that. So
Thank you, Rose.
thank you so much. Was that something that you personally saw? Or was that based on a famous photograph that I'm thinking about?
I looked at that photograph, but for me, the photograph came alive. And I'm very interested in how human beings influence each other.
Mhm.
How do we influence each other?
And so that's something that you're sharing of how that photograph influenced you, and you're sharing that with the world when you write that poem.
Right.
Has that poem been published anywhere that I could find? Because it's really wonderful.
It's in my latest book, The World Began with Yes.
Okay.
And there it is. The World Began with Yes.
Thank you so much.
Has it also been published in a magazine? I can't remember.
Okay.
But
very powerful. Is there
sometimes you read the newspaper and you find something in the newspaper that you have to write a poem about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, but you write too.
I do. And I guess sometimes it's called a found poem, you know, when you read something, or, you know, you sort of found it, like you hear a conversation, you know, and you have to put it down because it's so startling.
Yeah. You overhear people. I always listen to people in cafes and on buses and on trains. And it's fascinating to me. Sometimes I'll jot down a line.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I even now I jot it down on my iPhone because I always have it with me, and then, you know, see what happens.
People don't know how much they reveal them in their conversation.
Absolutely. I think, and as with this pandemic, I missed that, you know, because I would go and write in a cafe, or I'd be on the train and hear people speaking. And now, I mean, I hear my own family, but it's a much smaller circle, you know.
Exactly.
Yes.
We need each other.
Yes.
People need people.
Is there another poem you'd like to share?
No, we can go on talking.
Okay. Very good. You made, I guess the book that you brought up made me think of tell us about your major at Columbia and how that is meant, what's that meant to you?
I fell in love with 18th century English literature because of satire. I love satire. And those writers were very, very funny and very ironic. And I probably started my love for irony with Dorothy Parker when I was a kid.
Well, she came later, right? But, you know, where you were reading British poets and
yeah, but I read Dorothy Parker when I was a teenager.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You know, without school, just because I wanted to be funny and clever and witty. So I study her to learn to be witty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, we learn from other writers.
Mm-hmm.
You would not be a good writer if you didn't read. Reading shows you what's possible and what's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you discover a subject that's not possible, you've got to make it your own and make it possible.
Yes. Yes. And did you have any circle, writing circles or, friends that you would share your work with regularly?
When I was at Barnard, I had 3 special friends, and we would get together once a week and read each other poems, short stories, fragments of novels. And that was very, very helpful. And we were all unpublished, and we remained the best of friends until the first one got published. And then it all fell apart because of competitiveness and envy and so on. But as long as we were all unpublished, it was perfect.
Interesting.
You know,
And now do you share your writing or
with
your husband, your daughter, or
yes, with friends.
with friends? Mhm.
Sometimes I do. And one of the nicest things is when you go to visit friends who might have a house somewhere else, and your friends are writers, and you share what you're working on. I once did that with my dear friend Ken Follett, who wrote thrillers, now writes historical novels. And all the people who were staying there in the house, some of whom were professional writers and some not, we were all sharing our work. And that was lovely.
That's terrific.
You know, but writing is meant to be shared.
Mm.
No, you're rolling.
No, I agree. I guess I think sometimes people, don't share it until they're showing their editor or somebody like that.
I think it's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very helpful to share your work. To see what gets across and what doesn't. What you communicate and what you don't communicate.
Right.
It can be very helpful. And even if you're not a professional writer, that can be very helpful.
To get a perspective of somebody who's not a writer.
Get a perspective of what you're communicating and what you're not.
Mm-hmm. And tell us what else I was going to ask you about. Are you teaching now?
I'm not. I wish I were, but I'm not. No, I'm working on my autobiography, and God only knows how long that's going to take me. I have pages and pages. Not all of it's equally good. I have to go through and see what's missing, what is worth saving, what's not worth saving. And I will let friends of mine read it at this point because I want to know what's of interest and what's not. An autobiography could go on for your whole life, of course.
Absolutely. And what do you think you would most want to be remembered for as you look back?
I know very well that we do not control what we're remembered for. And we have to give up the idea that we will control it. We don't know what history will bring. We don't know even what books will remain. Some books don't remain. I once looked up how many writers were known for more than one book. And I discovered to my horror that most writers were known for only one book, if they were known at all.
Really?
So,
Mm.
You have to be modest about things.
Interesting. Well, that's wonderful for you to say, and I hope that that sentiment. I mean, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you.
We have so many questions coming in, so I just jumped in. It was so great to listen just to 2 writers talking to each other. It was amazing. Courtney says, what's the best way to unblock your voice for a memoir? I know you're in the middle of writing your memoir.
How do you unblock your voice? it's different on different days. I mean, of course, there are mornings you wake up and you say, nobody's going to want to read this shit, right? And it's no good. And then there are other mornings when you say, oh no, I know, this has got to be the beginning. It's an ever-shifting thing. And I've been sharing the book in progress with some friends, and it really makes you humble.
Here, Courtney says, this is incredible. So happy to see this live. And many people are commenting about your mention of satire and its role in writing. And you mentioned your papers being at Columbia. I know they're measured in linear feet. That's how they, when you donate your books, that's how they count them. And so I'm sure you're occupying many feet of shelf space at Columbia. We're looking at some of the comments here. Who are your favorite writers is one of the questions that came in.
Oh, so many favorite writers. I have, a few years ago, I discovered a poet called Szymborska, Wisława Szymborska. Of course, I love the Russian poet Marina Tsvetaeva. Of course, God, many writers. And when I look at my shelves, I see how many important writers there are. I was liberated as a young writer by Sylvia Plath. She let us be angry in writing. She was the one who liberated women to write anger. And that's very important, because human beings can be angry as well as nice. And I thought that was very important. Of course, I adored Yeats. William Butler Yeats, always have. But every time I discover a new writer, I realize that writing never ends. Every era needs its own chroniclers. Every country has its own writers. Very important. We're one of
Ulrich says, thank you, Erica Sree, for having Erica on the show. I'm a big fan and read her books, at least 5 of them, all in German, back in the 80s. Once I had moved to LA, there was much less time for reading.
Right. But, you know, we are creatures of language. Human beings are creatures of language. So we have to constantly use the language to define who we are. And we always need new writers to show us new things about human beings. It's an endless process.
Have you read Claudia Rankine, the poet Claudia Rankine?
I'm not getting much audio there.
Repeat your question, please.
Have you read the poet Claudia Rankine?
I have read her, and she can be very good. In fact, I was reading her the other day.
We're almost out of time, and we need to let you get back your evening. But I just want to show you that Courtney says, holiday gifts for everyone. The world began with yes. So, sorry, I muted your mic there. Please go ahead.
That's my latest book of poems, and I really do love it.
My father's watching from Kerala in India. He instilled in me a lifelong love for Shakespeare that he developed, even though he lived in a tiny village in Kerala, mud walls and thatched roof. And from there, he became a diplomat and gave me my love of writing and reading. And he says, the principle I follow is that what I write should be autobiography. Only what we ought to write is what he says. And Rajan says, this was amazing. Thank you, Ms. Jong, and blessings to you and your family, or not least to Sree and Vandana and Rose for all the hard work you do to bring all these shows. Thank you, Rajan, and all these people who watch us are amazing, and they're learning so much. And Diane says, what would Erica travel to where would Erica travel to? In exploration for her autobiography.
Write and rewrite. Throw out pages that are boring. That's really the issue. You want to keep only the most interesting stuff, the stuff that really changed your life. So a lot of editing.
You edit as you edit as you go, or do you wait for you to have the whole manuscript and then you toss out pages, or you edit it then?
I edit as I go along.
All right. With this, we want to let you go, but we want to give you a chance to maybe just say something that about the next 40 days or so that we have till the elections. What are you going to be watching for? What are your thoughts on what's about to happen to this country?
I will be looking for the end of Trump. I think he's a very destructive presence to our democracy. And I am looking for a new way of looking at the world that is not so much about gimme, 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 gimme more. I think that we need politicians to inspire us and to show us our best selves. And he does not do that for me.
Thank you for everything tonight. Thank you for sharing your love of books and writing and just being with us tonight as people are commenting. They're so grateful to you for your time. So we want to say thank you and let you get back to your evening.
Thank you very much.
And behind you, we saw your husband moving around. And I said that he'd be a fascinating interview in himself, not just for his work and what he has done, but also what's it like to be married to Erica Jong. There he is.
There he is. It's absolutely wonderful to be married to Erica Jong.
I have to say that I never thought I would find somebody I felt as close to as I do to Ken. And he is a great believer in women doing what they need to do in the world. And that's very, very important. I wish every woman could have a husband as supportive as mine.
Well, on that note, you had said earlier that Marty and Ruth were an amazing couple as well.
They were like that. Yeah. Very much so. And he would say, the best thing I've done in my life is to take care of this brilliant woman. Amazing.
Thank you very much to both of you. We're so grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Rose.
Ken, call me, Ken. We'll talk.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, Rose, another home run to a grand slam today. Terrific interview with a terrific guest, legendary writer, novelist, poet, activist, feminist, the great Erica Jong. Thank you for the interview, and thank you for bringing her to all of us.
Oh, thank you so much. Her daughter, I think, went to school where my kids also went to school in Connecticut. So I've been, of course, following her career, but and I think her daughter knows some people we know. But she's really a thrill. I didn't know this morning that I'd be speaking to her. So
yeah, and here Grand Slam, great show, says Courtney, watching from Arizona. Thank you, Courtney, for being here, and for everybody for writing, participating. My dad, everybody knows of the novel, even if they've not read it, and how famous it was at the time. And just before I let you go, Rose, I just want to ask you, here we are approaching 200 episodes in 200 days. 197 is today. How have you kept that smile and kept that energy and kept that focus while also, doing all the work you do? And your kids were home. You had thought that they would not be home, but they were home this summer. How did you keep it all going?
I guess, this has been a joy in a way, because learning so much and meeting so many people that I don't know how I'd meet otherwise. And it's been, delightful sometimes to see the reach I've had with the Woman to Follow hashtag, and the great woman I've met through that. And it's given me kind of a leeway into, trying to book them on short notice for a show like this. And just, great. And now I have so many so many books that I have to read, or, and so many great ideas that have been shared in the show. And I think that along with the work of, making 10, 20 calls or whatever, there's the moment that, that comes to fruition and we're able to do a show like this.
Yeah, and it's really special. I hope you will consider, if you have time, to turn this into a written interview or a profile for Women to Follow, because she was absolutely terrific. We knew she would be, but yes. A great interview. And thank you so much, Rose. I'll let you go.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. Bye. Thanks very much. And that's Rose Horowitz, one of our producers, along with Vandana Menon, who make the show possible every single day for 157 days. 197. I don't know where I lost 40 days. Somebody asked, what are we doing for our 200th show? As when we have these milestones, we'd love to hear from you, and please send us messages. Our 200th episode is Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. We do Saturday episodes at 9 a.m. Eastern so that Rose and Vandana can have the evening off, and I can be with my family on Saturday evenings as well. And so we have a terrific speaker who's going to be with us from the World Health Organization. Bente Mikkelsen will be here. She's the director of WHO's Department of Chronic Diseases, and we want to hear how COVID and chronic diseases. Oh boy, look at my spelling of diseases. I really had I went to town with that. I've got to fix that spelling. But she's a former CEO of a Norwegian health authority with 70,000 employees and an $8 billion budget. Imagine that was her job before this. So that gives you a sense of how important this job is for her. And our 201st episode is also going to be terrific. New York Times Michael Schmidt will be here. He is the best-selling author of Donald Trump versus the United States, Inside the Struggle to Stop the President. He's a reporter for the New York Times and a contributor to MSNBC. Sundays, as everybody knows, is our New York Times Day, because in the morning we read the New York Times out loud on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Our guest that morning will be Lori White, president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, Rhode Island's biggest private sector business advocacy and economic development organization. And she used to be a journalist herself and married to a crusading investigative journalist, Jim Tarakani. And so that's Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And do join us for that. Before we leave, we will say their names. And especially tonight, it's so important because you may have heard the news that in the Breonna Taylor case, the grand jury did not indict on the most serious charges. There was one relatively minor charge where in effect, they were saying that what happened with the shooting of the building from the outside was worse than the shooting of Breonna Taylor in her own bed as she was killed. That happened today, and we are going to say their names, and then we're going to thank our sponsors. We'll thank our sponsors first. The Inventor in You, a step-by-step guide to your first invention, by Charles Cunnincarroll, developer of more than 80 patents, at Inventor Charles and guide to invention.com. Please check out his book, and also check out Nunbelievable, Divinely Delicious Cookies on a Mission, 20% off with the code SREE. We also want to thank Muckrack Academy for helping me put together Fundamentals of Social Media for journalists, PR pros, and everyone, a free on-demand certification course. More than 4,000 people have taken the class. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. And here are just some of the people who have gotten their certificate and put it on their LinkedIn. Hope you will do the same. mrac.co/social. And a reminder about She's on Call, a terrific show that runs every Sunday. Rose is one of the producers of that show. Our friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian, are the hosts of that show. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. And with that, I just want to read the names and say their names, especially tonight. So important. We use the Time Magazine list. You can see the names around the border, and the painting by Titus Kaffir on the left, and on the right, a photograph of Larcinia Floyd and her young son George in her arms. She would die 2 years almost to the day that he would be killed on videotape in Minneapolis. They're now buried next to each other in Houston. And here are the names: Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Jerame Reed, Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, William Chapman, Sandra Bland, Darius Stewart, Samuel DuBose, Janet Wilson, Kaylin Rockmore, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Joseph Mann, Terrence Crutcher, Chad Robertson, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark, Danny Ray Thomas, Antoine Rose, Botham Jean, Tatiana Jefferson, Michael Dean, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor. If you haven't seen it yet, on Hulu, they have a New York Times video show, the weekly show, New York Times Weekly, and they have an amazing look at the true story of what happened to Breonna Taylor. You can also read the story in the New York Times and the reporting by Rukmini Callimachi. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support, and thank you for sending us ideas on themes, on guest ideas, speaker ideas. We'd love to hear from you. My email is right here, sree@sree.net. And if you can follow us on YouTube and on Twitter, that would be great, at SreeNet on both places, and at Sree on Twitter, but SreeNet on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. That's one way for you to support the show. And another is to take a look at this particular QR code, and it'll add you to, you get a gentle alert at whenever we're live. So we'd love to let you know. And it's not adding you to another WhatsApp group. It's a gentle alert via WhatsApp, or just email me and we can talk. Let's just see what are the final comments coming in here. So many comments. Thank you all for sending these awesome comments here today. Mark says, amazing show. And Pradnya says, we should have a chat to get acquainted. I love that when people connect. Earlier, Mark said that one of our guests, Simon Tam, was on his show, and Simon has a court case that was that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he talked about RBG on Mark's show, which is awesome. And Rajan says, blessings and love to all. I'm so angry that what the grand jury failed to do in the case of Breonna Taylor. And human life is cheap, but buildings are sacred. F that. Good night, everyone. And Diane says, thank you. And Diane, what a great story about catering and your husband catering Erica Jong's dinner. This world is so small and so big at the same time. Thank you all, everyone, for being here, for your incredible support of this show, and for all you do in the world. Be kind, stay safe, and we'll see you again. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we have a noon Eastern show because in the evening we have a big show with Steve Van Zandt and Drew Carey. You know them from our previous shows that we've done. Steve Van Zandt, you know, from the E Street Band and from The Sopranos, and Lilyhammer, and Drew Carey, you know him from The Price is Right, and he's on TV so much, he's at Drew from TV. So that's in the evening at 9 p.m. Eastern. So in the morning, we have our show at noon. So we'll see you then, everybody. Thanks for